All right, welcome back to the Carl Jackson Show, guys. I am joined by my guest now, John R. Lott Jr. You guys know him. More guns, less crime. He's the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center. He served as senior advisor for research and statistics in the Office of Justice Programs and the Office of Legal Policy at the Justice Department. And John, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're an economist by training, are you not?
Yeah, I have a PhD in economics.
Okay, all right, and I always want to remember that. But when it comes to stats, I mean, John is the guy to go to. Make sure you check out his website, crimepreventionresearch.org. Here's the reason. I'm sorry, crime research. Thank you. All right, so this is why I brought John on today. He's penned a column. It was on the Federalist. And I want to talk about it because he wrote about how, contrary to media claims, deporting illegal alien criminals will save taxpayers more than it costs. And that is the title of the piece. And John, it's baffling to me that the left and the Biden administration has allowed over 10 million illegal aliens to come into the country since his presidency began. And they weren't worried about cost, but all of a sudden the left is worried about the cost of deporting illegals. It seems kind of strange to me.
Right. I mean, I guess the thing that just kind of amazes me a little bit is just how uncritically the media repeats numbers that are put out there by different interest groups. One that's been getting a lot of attention is by the American Immigration Council, a group that's kind of on the left part of the spectrum, but they're claiming that it costs $88,000 per deportee that you're going to be deporting. And, the assumptions that they make are ludicrous. So 3/4 of that cost, $66,000 out of each $88,000, is what they call the cost of detention, actually going and housing somebody while you're waiting for them to get deported. And what they assume is that if you're going to be deporting 1 million people a year, you're going to have 1 million beds in order to go, and facilities to go and deport those individuals. But they also assume that each individual's there only going to be there for 2 months on average. So it's kind of like saying I have a hotel that, let's say, over the course of a year is going to have 10,000 people stay at the hotel. That
Sure.
doesn't mean I need a hotel with 1,000 rooms that are there, because even if it's 1,000 over the whole year, most people may be there for 1 night or 2 nights or whatever.
Sure.
And so I may need, just a couple hundred rooms or 100 rooms or something like that in order to get to that. Well,
And go ahead. I'm sorry.
And they essentially do the same thing. So even if we accept their claim that it's 2 months on average that a person's going to be there, and I think that's much too high, but even if we accept that essentially means that on average, you're going to have 167,000 people that you're going to be detaining at any one point in time. That's a lot different than 1 million facilities for 1 million people. On top of that, they assume that those facilities will have to be completely rebuilt each year. So you build a facility that holds 1 million people, you have it for 1 year, and then you have to build another facility that will hold 1 million people. And so, those are just some of the assumptions that they make there. What I try to argue in the piece is, I think a much more reasonable approach is, rather than kind of guessing different assumptions about cost, why don't we look to see what the per deportee cost has been over the course of the last 10 years or so. And if you do that, you find that in any given year, the costs range from about $9,000 per deportee to about $12,000 per deportee, which is obviously just a fraction of the $88,000 that's there. And even that, I think, may be a little bit high because it's including some custom services and other things that ICE does that are separate activities than going to be involved in deportations.
John, you describe this as the immigration advocacy organizations are out to create shock value numbers intentionally that overestimate the real cost of deportation. What do you believe? I know you're a numbers guy, but what do you believe the end game is for these advocacy organizations? Is it just to gin up some type of hey, listen, Trump, we can't do this. We can't afford this, despite the fact that they didn't care how much it costs to bring illegals in, to fly them in some cases, to house them in places like New York City and around the country that the Biden administration has been doing. What do you think is the aim of these advocacy groups in putting out these intentionally, I believe, false numbers?
Right. Well, I mean, I think it's pretty clear what their intention is. They want to say, look, it's too costly to deport these individuals, so we should just leave them here in the United States. You bring up an excellent point. It's not like they're costless here in the United States now. We're paying literally hundreds of billions of dollars in terms of housing, in terms of food, in terms of medical care, in terms of schooling that's there in order to take care of these individuals. They're not paying taxes that anywhere near remotely cover those costs. But there are other costs too. One thing that came out about a month before the election was the deputy director for ICE finally responded to requests for information from Congressman Gonzalez in Texas, where he was asking, how many of the people that you've screened and then let into the country have you found have criminal records from their home country? And so there have been so-called non-detained individuals that they've screened, about 7.4 million of them that they've screened and then let into the country, that they've then determined at some later date, and obviously this isn't complete, that about 662,000 of them have had criminal records. So that's 9% of the total there. And, as I say, there's good reasons to believe that that's even an undercount. But the National Institute of Justice has tried to get measures of the costs to victims of crime. So you have things like lost wages, things like medical bills that people face.
That's a good idea.
Pain and suffering. And now they don't categorize all the different crimes that are listed by these illegals in the ICE report there. They only have numbers. They only have estimates of the victimization costs for about half of them. But if you take the half that's there and assume that these illegals commit one crime similar to what they committed in their home countries, the victimization costs, and again, criminals likely commit multiple crimes, not just one, okay?
Sure.
And again, I don't have numbers for half of the types of crimes that are listed in the ICE report. You're talking about a cost of $166 billion for those 662,000 illegals there. If you're talking about deporting them, you're talking about, I think the cost of deporting is going to be less than $10 billion. So you compare that $10 billion to, $166 billion, a conservative estimate of the cost to victims of crime. It's not even a close call in terms of comparing the costs versus the benefits. And obviously it's going to be those types of criminals that the Trump administration is going to prioritize first to get deported.
All right, I'm speaking of John R. Lott Jr. He is the president of Crime Prevention Research Center. John, we only have about a minute and a half left in this block, and then I want to continue with you for another segment. But obviously, you're a numbers guy. I'm coming at this from a political angle. Obviously, there are two narratives that are in play. You've got the illegals that have come in. You've got Trump that wants to mass deport a lot of the illegals that have come in. As a result of the Biden's open border policies. There's two narratives at play. Is this narrative taking a hold? This particular narrative, is it taking a hold where you could potentially see maybe some Republicans kind of backing off of the mass deportation issue, because what I'm afraid of are a bunch of weak-kneed Republicans that are going to not want to back Trump in mass deportation if this narrative prevails.
Well, it's probably a little bit above my pay grade to go and figure out.
I doubt that a bit.
You're probably better situated than that than I am. I try to stick to the numbers.
Sure.
All I can say is apparently the people who are pushing these numbers, I mean, the New York Times has had like 6 news stories on this. USA Today has had a number of news stories on this. It's been covered by basically, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, multiple times. The Senate
30
Democrats,
seconds in this block.
Yeah, had hearings where they were making points about this. So apparently somebody must believe it matters for the very reason that you're bringing up, or they wouldn't be harping on this and repeating it over and over again.
All right, I'm speaking to John R. Lott Jr. You guys know, his book, More Guns, Less Crime, actually. He has other books out as well. Check him out, crimeresearch.org. He's the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center. We'll be back with more after the break. You guys stay tuned. Hey, Carl Jackson here for MyPillow, and MyPillow is excited to announce that they still have their Christmas extravaganza going. Get this season's flannel sheets for as low as $59.98, but they won't last long, so get them while you can. They're famous mice slippers. These haven't been on sale for over a year. They're regularly priced at $119.98, but for a limited time only, they're $59.98. And their 6-piece towel sets are back in stock with extremely limited quantities. They're only $29.98. With hundreds of MyPillow products, there's something for everyone. From bathrobes, duvets, quilts, down comforters, so much more. Go to MyPillow.com or call 800-858-0263. And be sure to use promo code Carl to save on all MyPillow products. That's promo code Carl. Flannel sheets for as low as $59.98. 6-piece towel sets for as low as $29.98. And that's not all. They're even extending their 60-day money-back guarantee all the way through March 1st of this year. Plus, all orders $75 or more ship absolutely free. MyPillow.com, promo code Carl. All right, back with my guest, John Lott. Make sure you check out and donate to his organization, Crime Prevention Research Center. Go to crimeresearch.org. Check out his book, More Guns, Less Crime. John, is there any other place you'd like people to go to check you out, to find your work?
The website's great, crimeresearch.org. I appreciate you mentioning it.
Okay. All right. So what we're talking about is John wrote a column that was out in the Federalist. Contrary to media claims, deporting illegal alien criminals will save taxpayers more than it costs. And that's what I want to touch on. That's what John has been touching on. There's an organization, the American Immigration Council, that are putting out shock value numbers, as he calls them. This is a scare tactic. It's absolutely amazing to me how, in my opinion, this left-wing organization is doing this. Just disregarding how much the Biden's open border policies are costing people, also in jobs, in housing, John. All of these issues that are causing prices to rise. You have people in urban neighborhoods, I'm sure, competing for low-skilled jobs. Right. The cost of deporting illegals, educational purposes, in school and all this kind of stuff, it's well worth it, in my opinion.
Right, I understand. Look, I'm an economist. Some of the points that you're making are obvious. Who are they letting in? They're letting in, as you say, unskilled workers. Who are they competing against for jobs? They're competing against unskilled Americans that are there. Maybe wealthy, elite people get to have, cheaper fees for somebody cleaning their pool or going and take care of other things in their yard, or, being nannies or whatever else. But the people who would otherwise have those jobs are having lower wages. And so, Democrats claim that they care about the poor, that they care about minorities, but who do they think they're hurting with these types of policies that they have? Those are the very people whose incomes are going down. And obviously we've had real incomes falling over the last 4 years on average, but these types of policies cause the real incomes for relatively low income people to fall even more than we see for the overall average.
And I love the fact as well, John, that you brought up the point earlier. I mean, some of these illegal aliens are committing crimes, obviously, and it's amazing to me that a lot of these organizations never consider the cost of the victims. I mean, whether it's their time, whether it's a hospital bill, as you mentioned, this absolutely fascinates me. What is it if we were to theoretically mass deport 13 million illegal aliens? What would be the benefit, in your opinion, of Trump having done that? Whether it's, I hope it can be done.
Right. Well, we don't even know how many millions need to be deported. So we know about 12 million that we know of. So people that have turned themselves in or got caught on the border, or we've had a couple million so-called gotaways that we see coming across the border, but we don't catch. But then there's a fourth group of people that we never saw coming across the border. And the problem is that the Biden administration has pulled about over 90% of the border agents who would normally be guarding the border, and instead using them to go and process the flood of illegals that are coming in. And on top of that, we have passive monitoring systems for the border. That's how we get these gotaways. But the problem is that as of a few months ago, the Biden administration admitted that about 30% of the passive monitoring systems along the border have been broken, and they have not been repairing them. So we have large portions of the border where we have neither agents nor passive monitoring system. So we have no clue how many more millions have come across that way.
Unbelievable.
But the thing is, the question is who gets hurt by this? And the thing is, anybody who studies crime know that criminals tend to commit crimes similar to people that are like themselves in their areas. And so, it's not just the jobs that they're taking away from low-income people, but it's also going to be those are the people who are likely to be the victims of violent crime. And so, their neighborhoods are being destroyed as these people move in and commit crimes against them. You have the famous thing on ABC News when Vance was on there and Martha Raddatz was saying, well, it's only a handful of apartment complexes that have been taken over by, Venezuelan gangs that are there. First of all, you mentioned the cost. The government was paying for their apartments, okay? They weren't having to pay for them themselves. And the other people who were paying out of their own pocket for the apartments were being terrorized. They were having their rent money taken away by those people. But the thing is, people tend to commit crime in the area where they're living. So it's many different ways when you're asking who gets harmed earlier, that we're hurting the most vulnerable people in our society from that. And it seems like we should have some sympathy for these people, because these are the people that are less able to go and withstand those costs.
I think if we had a media that were really out to do their job, there would be more empathy. But at least in my opinion, politically speaking, this is a narrative war almost. I don't think the media wants to report this stuff, John. Right. You mentioned here there's daily cost.
One quick comment on that.
Sure.
You're exactly right. You look at some of these people like the Laken Riley murder,
yes.
A Venezuelan gang member. He was processed like 6 times by the Biden administration. And yet, even though he had gang tattoos and was a member of a violent gang from Venezuela, they kept on releasing him. But you go and look at like AP or other news stories on there. For some reason, he's just a guy who went and killed this wonderful young woman. They don't mention that he was an illegal alien. You have that young girl in Houston, Texas, who was brutally raped and then murdered over a period of time by 2 illegal aliens from Central America.
Yes, the Nangaray girl, yes.
Right. And, just horribly, brutally tortured. the Associated Press, again, doesn't mention that they were illegal aliens with there. So I think the point that you're bringing up about what people know and what they're told is important.
And again, just to reiterate, we only have 3 minutes left with John R. Lott Jr. Make sure you check out his website, crimeresearch.org. He is the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center. And just, a couple of things that you mentioned and I thought was really cool. Daily cost of detaining an individual. You gave an example, basically prison costs. They talking about this AIC organization that is intentionally overinflating the amount of money that it would cost to deport a lot of the illegals that have come in through Biden's border crossings. You say they also assume that the daily cost of detaining an individual is $237 and a family is $482. In the U.S. in 2022, the daily cost for prisoners in federal medium security prisons is $122.50. So in other words, these guys are inflating numbers every which way but loose to try to make people feel sympathetic for the illegals and just think, oh, we simply can't afford to do this.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. I mean, this is basically things like food costs and other things. I don't know. If you have a family of four, can you kind of make it on food and stuff on $482 a day? I hope so. Man. I don't know what type of food. I mean, I could try on that. But look, I mean, that's the reason why rather than just having somebody go and make up assumptions about what they think the costs are, my approach in the piece was to say, look, what has been the cost? Let's divide it by the number of deportees that we have in any given year. And you get numbers rather than 88,000, you get numbers there between 9 and 12,000. And beyond that, one other thing you need to point out is that we've had larger levels of deportations in the past. Under the Clinton administration, they got up to about 1.8 million. And one thing a year, and one thing you see there is that when you've had a large number of deportees, the cost per deportee has actually gone down. So there seems to be some economies of scale. And so when you're talking about all the many millions that the Trump administration is doing, even these estimates of $9 to $12,000 may be high.
Yeah, that sounds good because they obviously got down a system here. Only 30 seconds left. But yeah, you mentioned yearly deportations during Bill Clinton averaged 1.5 million, George W. Bush 1.2, and under Obama 656,000. So it looks like Bill Clinton was actually the deporter in chief, not Obama.
Right. No, they've been falling pretty consistently over time. Obviously, and Biden's even below that. But
wow.
It's.
All right. Well, listen, John R. Lott Jr., I appreciate you coming back on to the program and sharing this information with us. And I'm asking you guys to read this column. Contrary to media claims, supporting illegal alien criminals will save taxpayers more than it costs. John R. Lott Jr., crimeresearch.org. We thank you so much.
Thank you for being there.